Continuation of The Wind in the Willows. Chapter 10. A Changed Toad. That evening, Rat brought Badger, Mole, and Toad into the parlor and dressed them for battle. He buckled a belt around each animal and stuck into it a sword, a cutlass, a pair of pistols, a club, several sets of handcuffs, some bandages, a canteen with water, and some sandwiches. Badger laughed good-naturedly at these preparations and held up his own big, thick stick. "I know you mean well, Ratty, but all I need is this stick to do what I have to. Please, Badger, I don't want to be blamed for forgetting anything. Now let's go." Badger picked up a lantern, raised his stick above his head, and called, "Follow me, Mole first, 'cause I'm pleased with him, Rat next, and Toad last. And today you'd better not make a sound." Toad sulked as he got at the end of the line. "What's so special about Moley?" he muttered. "I'm much cleverer than he." The animals set off, with Badger leading them along the river, and then he suddenly swung over the edge of the bank and dropped into the hole. Mole and Rat followed quickly, but sulking, clumsy Toad managed to slip and fall into the water. His loud splash and cry of fear stopped the others, and they turned back to pull him out. "If there's any more of your foolishness, Toad, I'll leave you behind," Badger warned. Then he signaled for them to continue on as the hole led into a dark, narrow tunnel. As they made their way along the tunnel, Toad began to shiver, partly from fear and partly from being soaked to the skin. When he began lagging behind, Rat called out, "Come on, Toad, come on!" Frightened at being left behind and alone, Toad came on so quickly that he ran into Rat, who ran into Mole, who ran into Badger, and there was much confusion, with everyone thinking they were being attacked from behind, that Toad barely escaped being hit by a bullet from Badger's pistol. By now, Badger was all ready to leave Toad behind, but Rat and Mole promised to watch him and keep him between them. They groped along until they heard sounds overhead. "We're under the banquet hall now," said Badger. "You can hear the weasels and ferrets shouting and stomping their feet and pounding their fists on the table with all of that noise. They'll never hear us come." Moments later, Badger stopped and pointed up. "Here's the trap door to the butler's pantry. Let's put our shoulders to it and push it back." Soon the door was opened, and the four friends climbed up into the pantry. Only a door separated from the banquet hall, and the noise coming from it was deafening. When the shouting and cheering quieted down a little, a voice of the animals recognized as the chief weasel's began to speak. "Thank you, friends. Cheers. I'd like to say a kind word, applause, about our good host, Mr. Toad." Great laughter. "Good Toad, modest Toad, honest Toad." Shrieks of merriment. "Let me at him," muttered Toad, gritting his teeth. "Just wait," said Badger, holding him back. "You'll get to him soon enough. Now get ready, everyone." Then, taking a firm grip of the big stick, Badger cried out, "The hour has come! Follow me!" He flung the door open, and the attackers raced into the banquet hall, the mighty Badger with his great stick swinging about his head, the grim Mole thrusting his sword in front of him, and determined Rat with a pistol in each hand, and the frenzied Toad leaping in the air and shrieking horrifying toad whoops. Oh, the squealing and the squeaking and the screeching that followed! The terrified weasels dove under the table and sprang towards the windows. The frantic ferrets rushed wildly for the fireplace and jammed themselves into the chimney. Tables and chairs overturned. Glass and china crashed to the floor. Food splattered on the walls and floors. The battle was over in minutes. The four heroes strode up and down the halls, whacking at any head that still moved, and the room was cleared, with the exception of a few weasels stretched out on the floor. These prisoners were being handcuffed by Mole. Badger leaned on his stick and called to Mole. "You were simply great, my friend. Now I think you ought to run along outside and see what those guards are doing. Between hearing your washerwoman's warning today and seeing the animals fleeing the hall tonight, they probably won't be giving us any more trouble." While Badger, Rat, and Toad began cleaning up the room and preparing some dinner for themselves, Mole hurried out. He wasn't gone more than a few minutes when he returned with an armful of rifles, which he dumped on the floor. "It's all over," he reported with a broad smile. "From what I can make out, some of the stoats were already nervous and jumpy when the attack began. They dropped their rifles and fled when they heard the shrieks and yells from inside the hall. The other stoats stayed at their posts for a while, but when the weasels and ferrets came running out, and the stoats feared they were being attacked, so they all began wrestling and punching and rolling over each other until they all rolled into the river. Every one of them. But these are their rifles." "Excellent. You're a fine animal," said Badger. "Now let's all sit down to our victory dinner." Being a gentleman, Toad put aside his conceit and jealousy and added, "Thank you kindly, dear Mole, for all your efforts tonight, and especially for your cleverness this morning." "That's my brave Toad," beamed Badger. "You know, Toad, you really should host a banquet for all the river bank to celebrate this victory, and it should be as early as tomorrow night. We'll take care of all the arrangements in the morning, but you'll need to write the invitations." Toad didn't like being told what to do. "I don't want to spend my first morning back at Toad Hall writing some silly invitations. It was your idea, Badger, so you make all the arrangements." Then suddenly a twinkle appeared in Toad's eye. "No, I'll do it, of course," said Toad. "It's all in the name of friendship." Badger looked at Toad suspiciously. "He's up to something," he thought. "I'd better keep an eye on him." That night they all slept at Toad Hall in the fine, clean beds that their prisoners had been forced to prepare for them. After breakfast the following morning, Toad hurried to his desk and began writing out his invitations. "How clever I am," he thought gleefully. "I can use the invitations to tell everyone how bravely I fought to recapture my home, how I personally drove the chief weasel out, and I can mention my triumphs while I was gone. Oh, what a wonderful opportunity this is! And I've even prepared a program for the evening with a welcome speech by Toad, with songs by Toad, and with a closing speech by Toad." And when the invitations were finished, Toad called in one of the weasel prisoners Mole had released. Beaming with pride at having outsmarted his friends, Toad gave the weasel his invitation to deliver. A while later at lunch, the animals saw that Toad had returned to his old conceited self. Rat and Badger nodded to Mole and to each other, as if they shared a secret plan. After lunch, Toad was about to swagger off to write his speeches for the banquet, when he suddenly felt himself gripped under each arm by Rat and Badger. They carried him into the library and shut the door. Dropping him into a chair, Badger stated, "Look here, Toad, we want you to understand that there will be no speeches and no songs at this banquet. We're not asking you, we're telling you." Toad saw that he was trapped. They saw through him. His dreams of glory for this evening were shattered. "Can't I sing just one little song?" he pleaded. "No, not one," said Rat firmly. "I know you're disappointed, Toady, but your songs are conceit and boasting, and your speeches are all self-praise and exaggeration, and full of hot air," added Badger. "You know we're doing this for your own good, Toad. You simply must turn over a new leaf, and this is the perfect time. Believe me, this hurts all of us more than it hurts you." Toad sat silently for a while, and then he looked up at his friends and said weakly, "You win, if I know you're right and I'm wrong. From now on, I'll be different. You'll never have to be ashamed of me ever again." And then he pressed his handkerchief to his face and staggered out of the room, sobbing. "I feel like a brute," said Rat. "I know," said Badger, "but it was for his own good. He can't go on being laughed at by stoats and weasels and ferrets, or even by animals at the river bank. I guess we were lucky to have intercepted that little weasel as he was setting out to deliver Toad's invitations. They were simply disgraceful. Mole is at Toad's desk this very moment writing new ones." By the time Toad reached his bedroom, a sparkle had replaced the tears in his eyes. He locked the door and closed the curtains, and then he placed all the chairs in a semicircle and stood facing them. He bowed to his invisible audience, raised his arms, and in a loud, dramatic voice began to sing a song of praise to Toad on the occasion of his homecoming. The song was cheered wildly by the delighted audience that existed clearly in Toad's imagination. That evening Mr. Toad of Toad Hall came down the stairs to greet his guests. All the animals cheered when he entered, crowded around him to congratulate him and praise his courage and his cleverness and his fighting skills. But Toad only smiled and murmured, "No, no, no. It was Badger who masterminded the whole attack, and it was Mole and Rat who did most of the fighting. I merely served in ranks and followed their lead. Really, I did little or nothing at all." Each time he spoke with such modesty, Toad glanced over at Badger and Rat. They were staring at him with their mouths open in amazement. This gave Toad great satisfaction. Even when some of the animals called for a speech from him, the master of Toad Hall shook his head modestly and refused, opening his mouth only to say a humble no. The banquet was a great success, and everyone agreed that Toad had indeed changed. After these events, the four animals continued their lives at Riverbank in joy and contentment. Toad sent a thank-you letter and a gift of gold locket and chain to the jailer's daughter, and even repaid the barge woman for the cost of her horse. On future summer evenings, the friends often took long walks through the wild wood, which was now safe and peaceful. Other weasels even brought their babies to the opening of their holes and pointed out, "See, there goes the great Mr. Toad and the gallant Mr. Rat and the famous Mr. Mole." But when the little ones misbehaved, their mothers threatened, "The terrible Mr. Badger will come and get you." Of course, this was not true at all. Even though Badger didn't much care for society, he was rather fond of children. Still, the threat always worked on the mischievous ones, and probably still does to this day. The end. I hope you've enjoyed this reading of The Wind in the Willows by Kenneth Grahame. And stay tuned for the next book we'll be reading on Wednesday. And thanks for listening to Miss Retro Reads.